Good evening and welcome to the Monday, January 10th, 2022, Kent County Public Schools Board of Education open session meeting. Want to go ahead and get started right in the agenda. And Dr. Couch, since I believe you are the secretary of the board, I will hand it over to you for portion B.
Right. Thank you, Mr. President. Annually in January, we have a reorganization of the Board of Education. So as the secretary for the Board of Education, I would call for election of board president for 2022. So with that, I would ask for a nomination for board president for 2022.
I'd like to nominate Joe Getz.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a nomination for Joe Getz and a second. Do we have any other further nominations?
I was.
Wendy.
So with that, I will ask for a vote. Those in favor of Joe Getz remaining as board president signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, Mr. Getz, you remain as board president.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Would you like to move forward and with vice president, or would you like for me to do that?
Please, if you could.
Okay. The election of vice president for 2022, the floor is open for nominations.
That is for board vice president.
Board vice president, yes.
Any nominations?
I would nominate Trish McGee for vice president. She'll do it.
Okay, so we have a nomination for Trish McGee to remain as board vice president. Do I have a second?
Really don't want to do it. I have a conflict. Yeah. I'll nominate Nivek.
I'll second.
Okay, so, wait a second. So we have a nomination for Nivek Johnson as vice president. We had a second with Francois Sullivan. Any further nominations? Okay, with that, all those in favor of Nivek Johnson as vice president for the Kent County Board of Education signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, carries unanimously. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Okay, moving on in the agenda, the approval of the agenda this evening. The administration is recommending the approval of this agenda. Do we have a motion to do so?
Sorry.
That's awesome.
So moved.
We have a motion by Dr. Costa. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Sullivan. Any further conversation, comments? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is moving to closed session. The Kent County Public Schools Board of Education members, this board, Dr. Karen Couch, the superintendent, Mr. Dan Hushin, supervisor of human resources, and Gail Manley, executive assistant to the superintendent, will move to closed session under General Provisions Article 3-305B to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, as well as any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals, as well as to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to those negotiations. Do we have a motion to move into closed session?
I motion that we move into closed session.
We have a motion by Ms. McGee. Do we have a second? We have a second by Mr. Johnson. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. We will move into closed session and be back to open the open session at 6:30 p.m. Welcome to the open session of the Kent County Public Schools Board of Education meeting. Today is January 10th, 2022. This is the second open session. We're opening back up. The first item on the agenda is to report on closed session. The Kent County Public Schools Board of Education members, this board, Dr. Karen Couch, the superintendent, Mr. Dan Hushin, Supervisor of Human Resources, and Gail Manley, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent, met in closed session under General Provisions Article 3-305B to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, as well as any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals, as well as to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to those negotiations. This session was for information and discussion purposes only. No action was taken. Personnel actions will be voted upon by this board after the superintendent's report. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Buckle, would you lead us there? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is approving the minutes as presented from the December 13th, 2021 open session meeting. Do we have a motion to do so?
So moved.
We have a motion by Dr. Costa. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Johnson. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. The minutes are approved as presented. Dr. Couch.
Okay, thank you, President Getz. I wanted to make an announcement about a reorganization of the board. Just to note that the board had an election during the first part of our meeting today, and Mr. Getz remains as the board president for 2022, and Nivek Johnson is our vice president for 2022. So I wanted to congratulate both of our board members for their positions.
Thank you.
That's interesting.
That's good.
Okay, as outlined in the strategic plan, we completed our learning walks at all of our schools. As you know, these observation and walkthroughs are an important process that allow us to capture the instructional processes and practices that are happening in our schools and provide opportunities to suggest improving instruction and a means to identify job-embedded professional development. All of those walkthroughs and learning walks were completed prior to the winter break, and I just wanted to let you know that we did complete as we had stated in our strategic plan. At its meeting on January the 6th, 2022, the State Ethics Commission reviewed our proposed revisions to the Kent County Board of Ed ethics policy that I forwarded to them on September the 29th, 2021. The commission informed me today that those revisions were approved as submitted, and as I noted earlier, there will be additional changes to the ethics policy based on House Bill 1058. So that's supposed to be coming down in the next couple of weeks, and I'll let you know how that affects the policy that was just approved by the Kent County Board of Ed. The Kent County Middle School Educational Specifications Committee had their 5th meeting last week, and at the last meeting, the committee conducted an extensive grade band discussion, which means we were talking about what should be included at the middle school. Should it be grades 5, 6, 7, 8? Should it be 6, 7, 8? Should it be 6, 7? And potentially 8th grade go to the high school? There's a lot of different grade band considerations that we had to talk about. As part of that, the members of the Interagency School Construction Division were also in attendance at our meeting, which was held by Zoom, and they would like us to complete a further study to talk about the state-rated capacity at the high school. So I'll talk about that further down into the agenda when we have it on as one of our action items tonight. And so I just wanted to alert you that that was prompted out of our meeting that we had last week for the Ed Specs Committee. I also wanted to bring to your attention a piece of legislation that has already been pre-filed by Delegate Brian Crosby. It's House Bill 126. It's permanent daylight savings time. Last year, this bill passed the House, but it was held up in the Senate. This bill would move Maryland to permanent daylight savings time, which would mean a winter sunrise as late as 8:39 in Maryland. Admittedly, if the legislation passes, it would still require surrounding states and the federal government to adopt permanent daylight savings. But I think it's important for you to know that this bill has been pre-filed, and so we may want to be thinking about how it would affect us, and if we want to take a strong position on this, moving forward with daylight savings time. So I thought it would be important for you to know about it, and I also thought it might be important to discuss this legislation with the Citizens Advisory Committee, so that perhaps this could be something that we may want to take a position on and send our thoughts to the legislature regarding whether we're in favor of permanent daylight savings time or not. I could see you have a question.
I'm on the legislative committee for MABE, and we had a meeting today, and this came up, this permanent daylight savings, and it's not as simple a thing as people would like to believe. I think it has very little chance of actually happening, because people would be getting up in the dark for hours. And all the, it's just not something that one state can do. It has to be really done, especially in small states like this, where we're constantly going back and forth to other states.
I just think we need to be aware of it.
Yeah, there's a movement behind it, but I don't think it's going to. I had a question. There must be research about the ideal configuration of grades, right?
Can we talk about that when we get to that because I think that's where I would really like to hear more about your opinion with regard to the grade bands. But I just wanted to note that this was something that we discussed at our Ed Specifications meeting. So that's perfect. Hold on to that thought, because I would like to listen to what you have to say about that. But concluding my report, I just wanted to note that the first meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee is January the 24th at 5:30. This week, we're going to be sending out reminder emails to all of the committee, reminding them of the meeting, just in case winter break has got them not remembering that we have a meeting coming up. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Phelps. The next item on the agenda is the Golden Anchor Award. I see Mr. Husser walking to the podium.
Thank you, President Getz, Dr. Couch, school board members. Tonight, we are here to hand out our monthly Golden Anchor Award. The Golden Anchor is presented each month to an employee or group of employees that exemplify the mission and core values of our school system. Parents, staff members, and students may nominate any KCPS employee for this award. Joining me tonight to present the nomination is our Supervisor of Special Education, Dr. Keene.
Good evening, Dr. Couch, President Getz, and members of the board.
Good
Can you hear me
evening.
now? Okay, great. I would like to share tonight how our related service providers have gone above and beyond their scope of practice to ensure that all students with disabilities in Kent County receive services during the pandemic. From the second day of school closure in March of 2020, our service providers hit the ground running with finding PD on how to implement services virtually and engaging families in the ins and outs of how to receive related services. Margaret Hitzkes, Annette Walls, and Tracy Rodney were stars in navigating the COVID world before we knew what we were really entering. They met from 10 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. for 2 full days of virtual training on how to implement services when schools were not in session, engage parents and their students on test runs of our new norm, and worked out kinks before we presented this to the rest of our special education staff. Their team grew when Melissa Mull joined us that summer, and we continued to improve our related services in the virtual world, which was not easy when you needed students' mouths in certain positions, body parts in certain positions, body movements to happen, and coaching parents to help implement services that they had never done before. As one of our parents, Mrs. Rashira Miller, said, which I could not say any better, these ladies went above what was expected, and because of them and their hard work, our students here in Kent County did not miss their special education services. We were able to roll out expectations and get students engaged in virtual learning. Plus, it did not stop last year. These ladies continue to provide virtual services, now known as telehealth services, to our students who were not in schools. This created an extra workload of work for them because all telehealth appointments had to be done individually, administered as outlined in their student's IEP, creating longer work days and larger workloads. Therefore, I, along with other parents of our students with disabilities in Kent County, not only owed this to this team, but want to nominate them for the Golden Anchor Award.
Ms. Walls, Ms. Hiskis, Dr. Mull, and Ms. Rodney, please come up front so we are all able to honor you. Congratulations.
Everybody smile with your eyes.
Congratulations again to the four of you. That's just really special. We know how tough everything has been, and you add layers of that. We really appreciate everything that you guys have done, and I think it's well deserved. Thank you for that.
You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. Or if you have to leave, you can leave as well. Bye.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the personnel actions. Mr. Hushin, I see you're at the podium there.
Thank you, President Getz. School board members, Dr. Couch again. Each month, the board receives a stated personnel action report. This report is discussed during closed session, and a vote is taken during open session. The administration seeks approval of those stated personnel actions.
Okay, as Mr. Hushin has mentioned, this is an action item. The administration is recommending approval of these stated personnel actions. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. McGee. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Sullivan. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Hushin. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is public participation. Ms. Manley, we do not have anyone. Moving on to Section 6 is the Kent County Teachers Association.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Dr. Couch, President Getz, members of the board, Mr. Buckle. Happy New Year. I hope that you were able to find some downtime during the recent holiday season and extended holiday break some of us had. Thank you, Mother Nature. With the onset of the Omicron variant, it's become abundantly clear that we are nowhere near the end of this pandemic. We are seeing some of the highest positivity rates in Kent County since March of 2020. Many of our members have real concerns about the numbers and contact tracing in our schools, and the new CDC guidelines have many of us worried. Our shared goal as ever is to keep students and staff as safe as possible in our schools, and we can only do this through transparency and frequent communication. As we weather this pandemic, we can be honest with ourselves that students lost progress and at some grade levels motivation when we were forced to go to virtual learning in March of 2020. Teachers did their best to provide meaningful work and to adapt to a new style of teaching in 2020-2021. Much of our knowledge of the technology platforms was self-taught and quickly acquired. I think Kent County teachers rose to the occasion and worked to provide students with the best education possible in the circumstances. Now that we are almost through a full semester of in-person learning during a pandemic, the real question becomes why anyone would think that upon the return to in-person learning, we could just speed up to make up for lost time. All of the building blocks that needed to be present for learning before are still needed, and students need time to catch up. The idea that honing in on more testing and data would somehow fix this learning loss is misguided at best. Right now, this is our chance to rethink and reform what real learning looks like for today's students. We need to trust teachers as professionals to know what their students need and when they need it. We need to give educators time and choice in professional development, and we need to stop using toxic positivity to push teachers to put work outside of contracted hours above time with their families and above their mental health. I hope those are all things that we're keeping in mind as we go forward with the schedule in the spring. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, the next section, number 7, is board discussion. Mr. Buckle, we'll start with you, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Couch, President Getz, and members of the board. As always, I'll start off tonight with school updates. From Kent County High School on January 12th, is the Kent County Public Schools Early Dismissal and Staff PD. On January 12th at 6 p.m. is Kent County High School's Interact Student Induction in the Auditorium. Again, that's 6 p.m. And then on January 17th is Martin Luther King holiday, schools and offices closed. And as well on January 17th is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. breakfast at the Rock Hall Fire Company. And then finally from Kent County High School on January 28th, schools closed and it's a teacher PD day. From Kent County Middle School, the following are home basketball games beginning at 3:30 p.m. On January 31st versus Bohemian Manor Middle School, February 7th versus Cherry Hill Middle School, and finally on February 11th versus Northeast Middle School. On January 26th is the National Assessment of Educational Progress for 50 randomly selected 8th graders. This is an assessment used for comparison among states and also international comparisons. Students will take tests in reading or math. From January 31st to February 11th is mid-year MAP testing window. And finally, from KCMS, Trojan Influence meets Monday through Thursday from 2:30 until 5, except for early dismissals and other announced days. From Henry Highland Garnett Elementary School, on January 11th, the Judy Center is partnering with Help Family Center to present positive solutions for family. And on January 14th is Community Mindfulness with Stav Pinder. From Galena Elementary School, Galena is looking forward to Maryland Science Center Assembly on January 14th, and on January 27th, Brian Curry will bring classic literature magically to life with the state-of-the-art multimedia, music, and illusions and book club, The Magic Assembly. He will introduce students to beloved books with funny and truly amazingly magical to get them excited with these stories and eager to read. Galena Elementary School will be playing an adaptation of Candyland as their PBIS thematic event for January. Each class has a paper bubblegum machine. Gumballs will be earned as a class when they demonstrate best behavior. B as in be respectful, E as in encourage kindness, S as in safety first, and finally T as in try your hardest. When 10 gumballs have been colored in, the class will go to the front office and draw a card. The card will indicate where they move as the class games piece on a life-size game board. The first class to reach the finish line, completing the game, will receive an ice cream party. Throughout the course of the game, individual students will be recognized by their teachers as Player of the Week for outstanding best behavior. And this concludes my school updates. A quick thank you and acknowledgement to Dr. Speary's retirement. Dr. Speary has spent over 42 years in education, 21 years working in schools and the school system, and 21 years in higher education and consulting. Thank you, Dr. Speary, and for all your hard work and support towards the betterment of education. As we see another variant of coronavirus swipe through the United States, I encourage students, faculty, and staff to please stay home when you do not feel good and to test yourself when exposed or feeling ill. As well, the health department offers first and second shots for 5 and up, and third booster shots for anyone 12 and up every Thursday for any student who would like to get vaccinated. The safest thing you can do for yourself and your peers is to socially distance, wear your mask, especially over your nose. The SGA is starting to provide educational materials and help educate students on the importance of mask wearing and COVID-19. We're hoping to add educational posters in the hallway about mask wearing and more. As we see counties like PG go totally virtual for 2 weeks, and others like Montgomery County continue to push back for the full closure, I ask the students and staff of Kent County to be safe and to continue to educate yourself on COVID-19 and the updated CDC guidelines that continue to be posted on the KCPS website. With agreement to Mrs. Bachman, I feel as though Kent County Public Schools must continue transparency and communication and do what is best for students and staff's health, both mental and physical. Since this is the first meeting of the new year, let us start the year off with hope and excellence. Happy New Year to all, and this concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Vogel. Dr. Costa?
Let's see, since, I think the Christmas show was since our last meeting, right? That was nice. I have been attending the legislative committee meetings of MABE. It's a good thing, I think, that there isn't very much in the pipeline for 2022 in terms of major legislation affecting education. Probably because we're still trying to digest all the Kerwin legislation. But I'm looking forward to going back to basketball games and things and getting back to normal after the snow.
Okay. Ms. Sullivan?
I want to also say congratulations to you, Mr. Getz, and Mr. Johnson for the election today. And I also want to kind of reiterate what Sam said and thank Dr. Sperry for her service, and she will definitely be missed, but we hope you enjoy your retirement. I'm also on the middle school ed spec committee, and we had, like Dr. Couch said, a pretty lengthy discussion on Thursday about all of the different variations of what the grades could be, and I'm sure that everyone has thoughts on that as well, so it'll be interesting to talk more about that a little bit later during this meeting. What else? Oh, I've been enjoying Ms. Hemstedter's weekly letters from the high school. I really appreciate that she's doing those communications, and I got to volunteer at Galena right before the holidays and went into a 4th grade class and did a craft with students, and that was a lot of fun. And I encourage all other parents that are interested to contact your principals in your schools, because your teachers would love to have you come in and volunteer. And I'm looking forward to the first Citizens Advisory Committee meeting with Trish and some of the members that are here tonight. So I will see you on the 24th. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McGee?
I want to congratulate Sam for getting into Columbia University early decision. I think he found out the day after we had our board meeting, so congratulations. That's quite an accomplishment, and I know it's been a long-term goal of yours, so I'm really happy for you and proud of you for our school. You're a great representative of Kent County High School. I want to also underscore what he said about the common sense practices to take with the newest variant of COVID. I can tell you just from my own experience covering sports, Kent County High School was supposed to play Easton High School today in both boys and girls basketball and a swim meet tomorrow, and all that was canceled, not because of Kent County, but because Easton is experiencing an outbreak, and Washington College's men's basketball team had 2 games canceled last week because their team had an outbreak. So it's like the invisible menace. It is definitely out there, and we all need to take responsibility for protecting ourselves and the person next to us. I think the Mother Nature helped us out a little bit last week. I do know that we probably would have been short-staffed because of experiences on our own staff, and I don't think any of us were ready to go back to school yet. So I think that was a good thing. So thank you. Congratulations to Mr. Getz and Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
First, I want to thank you all for the congratulatory remarks as well. Congratulations, Mr. Getz. Hopefully that everyone had a great holiday and stayed safe. I also attended the Seasonal Sensations dinner. I thought that was very nice. I always enjoy seeing the talent that our students bring. And the food, I'm still hanging on to my COVID-19 basket. It's still sitting in the back of my car, but I have utilized some of those things because they've come in handy just at the right time. MABE is still doing their work on equity as we continue to publish scenarios and the books for us to guide our equity work. Wanted to volunteer at one of our communities mentoring programs with some students, so that was great. Two things. One, I was listening to a podcast today, and I thought this was very informative to the work that we are doing. It was about ambiguous loss, and it was a different type of loss. When we think about loss, we think about, a death of a loved one, but thinking about how much was lost during the pandemic. And I was equating that to the work that we do in schools and how our students are coming to us on all different levels. And even just not our students, our educators are coming with us at all different levels. Data is presenting and showing that, there is a concern about the mass teacher exodus, and there's a concern, will we be able to continue in the kind of the educational setting? So it was very eye-opening, and just being mindful that, you are your one person, and that we all have to take care of ourselves, especially. Wanted to echo just, again, the common sense practices that Ms. McGee talked about. It is really a data. I know the school I serve, the data is going up and up and up. So I, again, can encourage people to just practice good health and hygiene and socially distant when possible, and all the jazz that comes with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Just a few things. Again, just reiterating everything that everyone else has mentioned tonight. I just want to add a few comments. Prior to going into the holidays, some of the events, the Planetarium Christmas Show was, as Dr. Costa mentioned, I thought that was fantastic. And I'll just say that, as we talk about the foundation, Dr. Costa, and we look at hopefully the organization of the Kent County Public School Foundation, that the planetarium becomes a focal point or a focus point for the group. Because I think, and looking at some of the materials that are still hanging there from the day the school opened, it really was a time capsule. But it was such a great use of space that I think that with the proper equipment, certainly we can kind of open that up and use it across multiple disciplines and do some really great things, not only for the school, but also for the public as well. Just another comment on the high school. The soup and salad event, Mr. Buckle, that's coming, I think the PTSA has at the end of the year. I signed up, so I would just ask that if anyone feels inclined to provide some soup or something, and I see some PTSA members in the audience, for the teachers there, and hopefully it can get spread out also to some of the other schools. I think it's hugely important for us to show some support. For anyone that's interested, I went with lasagna soup rather than chicken noodles, so I'm pretty excited about that. But just all kidding aside, just with the Golden Anchor Award tonight and the support that we're giving right now, it's all hands on deck, right? And we know where this Omicron variant's going. We know what's happening locally and nationally, and I think that we just all need to continue to push forward as we're doing, and not lose sight of where we are. And just finally, just a thank you to the board for the reorganization, the confidence that you have in the group. It's not an isolated position as president or vice president or superintendent or board members or student board member. We're all in it together. So I just certainly want to thank you all for that, for the reorg, if you will. But I look at it as it's all of us, and I just really appreciate your your partnership in this endeavor. So thank you for all that. Okay, the next item on the agenda, Section 8, is Education Services. We have the fiscal year 23 school calendar update is next. I see Mr. Hushin is walking forward again.
Good evening, President Gads, board members, Dr. Couch. I've been looking forward to being able to share with you where we are in our proposed school calendar for school year 2022-2023. The calendar committee has met twice. We met back on December 17th as well as January 4th, along with a number of email exchanges. During that time, we started off with an initial survey. Bear with me. There you go. That we sent out just asking some basic questions, which I will review with you here shortly. But from that initial survey, we had 468 responses. You can see the breakdown in front of you. It was almost, split half and half between staff with students as well as our parents, with a few members from our Kent County community that also gave some input as well. What you will see on the next slide, one of the first questions that we posed was, what was everyone in favor of, a pre or a post Labor Day start? We put some options out there with a September 6th start date after Labor Day. We threw out an August 29th start date, which would take us back that week before Labor Day, or an even earlier start of August 22nd, which would be 2 weeks before Labor Day. As you can see, the majority at this time selected a post Labor Day start of 67.7%. But what I will share with you over the next 3 slides is where things get a little interesting. So one of the first questions we posed was the MSEA Day, which is that third Friday in October. In the last couple of years, this has been a professional development day for our teachers and our admin. Students have had off as well as our support staff. As you can see, the breakdown here was close, with 51.4% being in favor of a teacher professional development day. I know within the last half hour, I've already received a question about what the breakdown was of how many teachers answered this survey, so that is something that I will have to break down. Winter break. We threw out what winter break start date do you prefer for students. As you can see, a December 22nd start date was the majority with 53.2%. So this is similar to what we've had this year, with a extended break of December 19th at 33.4%, which we did put in there. We knew, that would definitely add some days to the school calendar. And starting break on the 23rd came in at 13.4. Same thing, what spring break days would you prefer? The majority selected an extended spring break from April 7th to April 12th, where there would be no school for our students and our 10-month staff. Schools and offices would be closed April 7th through April 10th. Before I show you the calendar templates, the reason why I said this is where it gets interesting is if you go back to the second slide, the majority was in favor of a post-Labor Day start. But you will see when we gave the options over a winter break and a spring break, the majority elected an extended spring break and extended winter break. That is almost nearly impossible with a post-Labor Day start. There's just not enough room, enough days to play with in a post-Labor Day start. So that led us to crafting a pre-Labor Day start as well as a post-Labor Day start. And I'm going to pull up the template with you just to highlight where we are. There we go. All right, so what is up on the screen would be a pre-Labor Day start with students reporting on August 29th. Some points to highlight is that Christmas break, the winter break, okay, would begin on the 21st, okay, and conclude on January 2nd, with January 2nd as a day off for 10-month staff and students. With this pre-Labor Day start, we would also be able to have an extended spring break from Thursday, April 6th through Wednesday, April 12th for, again, students and our 10-month staff. One of the questions that came up is why Thursday to Wednesday? And the reason for that are under COMAR, we need to give our staff off for Good Friday, but also there are contractual days with Good Friday and Easter Monday that need to be given off. So there wasn't enough days to give a complete week leading up to Easter with giving them off Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So that is why it is a Thursday to Wednesday break. I would like to note that on both calendars, I'm sorry, Dr. Kosh, did you have a question?
No, it was my computer acting stupid.
Oh, okay. Siri? You will see on both calendars that we have an end date of the same end date on both pre and post, which I will talk about towards the end. So with the pre-Labor Day calendar, students start on the 29th, a little bit of an extended break for winter, giving off January 2nd, which was a comment that quite a few folks made during the initial survey. Many folks commented that they felt that students and staff should have that following day off. And then the extended spring break and an ending date of June 15th. Are there any questions on this first calendar? Okay. And our post-Labor Day calendar is very similar to what our calendar is this year. I believe we've gone with a post-Labor Day start for at least the last 2 years. It's been pretty similar. It has students starting on Tuesday, September 6th. The 21st is that MSEA day. It is in as a professional development day. And we have the holiday break starting on the 23rd. And we also built in giving our students and 10-month staff off the January 2nd. And the other difference here is that this is a shorter spring break compared to the one in the pre Labor Day start with an April 6th start and ending on April 10th. You will see that it is the same end day on both calendars, as I said earlier.
Mr. Hutchin, on the April 5th, before the spring break in this version, that looks like a half a day, correct?
Yes, that's what we have projected as a, well, it's projected in there right now as a 90-minute early dismissal. However, one of the things that we will have for you when we bring a final proposal forward next month is that we do intend to build in some half-days on those Wednesdays. One of the comments that we've received from some of our staff and some of our families is trying to move those days from Wednesday to Friday, but we know from the past that having early dismissal days on Fridays can lead to a lot of absences.
High absenteeism.
Any questions on the post-Labor Day start? Very similar this year.
I just, with the post-Labor Day start, I know there's no, but I just get so concerned if you go down to December. Could you go down to December?
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
I just get so concerned that that day is so close to the holiday, and so you're making a strong ask, you know, for families to travel, and I know that's something we favored since I've been on the board of the post-Labor Day, but I would like to see, is there other days that we could give up?
Yeah, so
To make that a little bit longer, because I hate to tax, you know, a family to be rushed. I'm just curious.
so it's similar to what we had this year, actually. We actually just built in the half-day release, but it ended this year on the 22nd, and 12-month staff offices were open on the 23rd. You know, one of the days is that January 2nd, which is that Monday, but it's after, you know, the federal holiday on the Sunday, and that was something that, as I said earlier, a lot of our parents and staff asked for. So we added that in there. I do want to say both calendars are also built on a 4-day, 4 built-in inclement weather days as well.
I was going to ask you about that, because I'm looking at the calendars, if I'm reading it correctly, both calendars have the same days for spring break, the 7th through the 10th, is that right?
No.
Okay.
It's the 7th and the 10th on both calendars are for our 12-month staff.
Oh, okay.
Offices are open. On the pre-Labor Day, it's the Thursday, the 6th through
Okay,
Wednesday,
yeah, okay.
12th.
Well, I'm just wondering if we have some wiggle room because, speaking of the 4 snow days, because we just used our allotment last week in one fell swoop. So are there going to be opportunities in the second half of the school year? Very rarely do we get an inclement day before the Christmas break that will be able to take a day somewhere if we have to use more than 4 inclement weather days?
Are you talking about right now or for next year?
I'm not talking about this year, I'm talking about next year's calendar. Or
Or
are we going to, and I don't mean this any sort of way other than, would we cross that bridge when we get to it?
I think it's one of those things we would probably cross that
Okay.
bridge when we got there.
You could probably take some time back from spring break.
Yeah.
Okay,
There are
but,
some other things that are contractually in as required days off.
okay,
Yes, that's why, you know, the post-Labor Day is very difficult. There's not much wiggle room with 3 days because of contractual holidays that are also built in. You know, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Johnson. We can certainly, you know, look into that. You know, we were trying to really, you know, give the best option of what the majority had asked for, and it was basically an extended holiday break, with an extended spring break. But potentially, maybe one day could come off the spring break on this, on this calendar, it's tough. Yeah.
One
would
of the
have to be-
reasons
it would
why,
have
one
to
of the
be-
reasons why it's so difficult is because we have a late Labor Day.
It's also true. But, that Thursday could be a day. I believe it's April 6th. But that would not, give a longer spring break. So we really tried to do, everything we could on both, so.
We have to be done by June 15th? We don't.
No, but typically, if we're not out by June 15th, there's not a lot of, you have to give yourself a little bit of time in case you have to make up snow days at the end of the school year. So that's another way, Ms. McGee, we can make up time. You don't necessarily have to take things away. You can add more days at the end of the calendar.
Yeah, because that's so popular.
That is so popular, yes.
Yeah. A question, I think it's a little bit of what Mr. Getz might have asked you. Will there be possibilities of changing a couple of the 90-minute early dismissals to the half-days? Like I'm looking like, for example, at the post-Labor Day start, the day before spring break is supposed to start is an early dismissal. Will we be considering that possibility for next year? Because I think it was pretty popular this year.
Right. The half-days that we would be building into this calendar would still be work days, but it would be more time for planning and more time for working with their principals, so it wouldn't necessarily be time that they would be dismissed from work.
But it would be a half-day for students, right? That's what I'm asking.
Right, right.
Yeah, so a family could get maybe a head start on their
Right.
vacation. Okay.
True.
Yeah.
Any further questions on the two proposed calendar templates?
Sam, what do you think? You're a student.
I mean, I'm not going to be here, but I know that in the past, I've always thought that, I have my friend who used to go to Kent County Public Schools, and now she's in Ohio, and they go before Labor Day, and she has longer breaks, and I like that better because I feel like it's that adjustment period in the middle where you're going from, especially at the high school where we have block semesters where you're kind of going from semester to semester and having that time off. So, I'm kind of in support of the post-Labor Day because I really, usually by time August, I'm ready to go back anyway. So that's what I would say.
Okay.
You're in favor, excuse me, you're in favor of the pre or the post?
The post.
Okay.
Any additional comments?
I do have a few more updates.
Oh, please.
So just to kind of show you, so we've been trying to send out a blast each week through email and over Facebook. As of last Thursday, we had a total of 560 responses, which was to vote on the two proposed calendars that I just reviewed. As of noon today, we were up to 645 responses, still in favor of a pre-Labor Day start of 53.3%. As of, in real time, or back to 6:51, we are up to 680 votes, with 53.7% being in favor of a pre-Labor Day start.
Which gives which gives an extended winter break and an extended spring break.
Correct. Other things, that have come up as we have talked is, giving those half days on some of our built-in 90-minute early release days. They will continue to be on Wednesday And something we need to start putting in our calendar going forward is the Juneteenth holiday, which in June 2023 will fall on a Monday, which, could become a situation if we do end up in a time where we have to extend the school year. That is now a state and federal holiday.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure, Ms. Johnson.
Standing, what is the difference between a 90-minute early dismissal and a half day?
The extra hour and a half.
Why is that? I would like to know the history behind it, the difference in why we don't just do half days and why we do some half days and some early
So-
dismissals.
Because we have to have a number of hours. It's in Comar, it's a number of days. We have to do 180 days, plus we have to meet the hour requirements. And because every time we build our calendar, we have to figure in how many hours we have at the elementary level, the middle school level, and the high school level. Our high school is the one that's always really close. So we built in the 90 minutes because we knew that if we had to close, every time we close for, not necessarily a snow day, but if we do like a 2-hour delay, we have to add those times and take those hours off.
Okay.
So, in reality, it makes sense that why don't we just do half days? We don't have enough time to do all of that.
Thank you.
And those hours, again, come into play when we're talking about a post-Labor Day start. There's just less to play with.
What about when something happens, like a pipe bursts and they have to send everybody home because there's no water?
We have to count that time, too.
We count that time?
Yeah, we count that time as missed time.
Okay.
Any questions or anything you would like to see before we bring forth a,
Well, I was going to ask you, when do you want to vote from us, and how much longer will the window be open for people to vote?
it is the calendar committee's plan to bring a final recommendation forward to you at our next meeting in February.
Okay.
We plan to continue to, keep the vote open and close it 1 week prior to.
Great.
It's really been a priority to make sure that everybody is being heard and has a chance to vote. And we have noticed each time we push it out, we do get anywhere from an additional, 125 to 200 more votes each time.
Is a paper ballot or something going home with students?
We have not done that. We could certainly, look at possibly doing that. The results have been, pretty good each time but if
I think that would be hard to pull back now. This is the most votes we've had in any given year. If you'll think about when we've approved other calendars, we've had less than 300 votes. So this is pretty high for us.
And I do have to thank our supervisor of technology who, I
Pushes it
have
out
to
regularly.
always say, hey, Mr. Porter, do you think you can help me out with this? And it's always no problem, and it's out literally within 60 seconds. So, thank you very much, Mr. Porter.
Great. Okay, that was for information only. Thank you, Mr. Hushin, for going through that. Certainly,
You're
we'll look forward to the next board meeting for final results and take some action on the calendar.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next item on the agenda is the district reopening plan.
Good evening, President Getz, Dr. Couch, members of the board, Mr. Buckle. Tonight, I bring to you just an opportunity to discuss our 6-month check-in with our reopening plan. Our plan remains posted on the website. We have not changed that. However, the task force committee chairs have met to be sure that any new guidance or changes that need to be made have been submitted. And tonight, we'd like to just share with you that in all of the various committees that meet, the main changes all centered around the new CDC guidance and the guidance from the Maryland State Department of Health. So with that area, our student service leader, as well as the principal of Garnett, are both the chairs of the safety committee. They have taken that information and given some of the reopening guidance and changes and posted them, and those revisions will be made to our plan after this evening. So tonight, this is for information and also an opportunity for input on our reopening plan. The primary changes that we're sharing this evening have to do with the changes that were made in terms of positive cases and quarantine. They're the big changes, and they were all sent home in a letter that was shared both with our board members and the public that went home on January 7th. In that letter, we have also shared some information regarding the screeners, and we know that we are no longer administering the staff screener, and the student screener is focusing on symptoms. So that's the primary focus, again, and it really echoes what we've heard as a priority tonight, and that is being responsible for our own health and to be sure that if you're sick, you stay home. The other change that the team has asked me just to point out quickly had to do with athletics. And I'm trying to read without my glasses because I left them at my seat. I apologize. The athletes are now and have been, I apologize, Dr. Couch, that they
Testing
have
every
been
14
vaccinated.
days. Yeah.
Can you read this? Look how tiny it is.
Yes.
About my
Athletes
glasses.
that have been vaccinated are tested bi-weekly. Vaccinated athletes may be tested upon request.
Thank you. My new eyes. Thank you, Mr. Ashton. So they were the primary changes. The other areas will continue to meet. For example, a big focus of our reopening plan is that of equity. Dr. Holacher has the next meeting scheduled for that group on the 20th. And other than that, our reopening plan has no other changes to share with you this evening. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions or considerations for the team.
How many of our students have been vaccinated, the eligible ones?
How many students have been
Yeah,
vaccinated?
and staff. I mean, I think we ought to know this.
Yeah, I'd say it's less than 50%.
That's students or staff?
That's students.
Okay.
Our staff is closer to 80%.
Yes.
85%.
When do you anticipate getting the
I
feedback
think,
from
let me
MS?
just say this, Dr. Costa, it's really hard for us to keep track of the students because the parents don't necessarily tell us if they've been vaccinated or not. So it's a little more difficult for us to track that and have a very firm number on that. And especially since they changed the age limit for some of the other vaccines, we rely on the health department to get us that information just simply because we don't always know. And they're saying that it's very, very low here in Kent County, the amount of students that have been vaccinated.
Ms. Sullivan had asked about when we expect to receive feedback on the plan. And so what we're required to do based on the American Rescue Plan as well as the ESSER funding that we receive is to publicly share the changes, receive any input from the public, update all of our links. That's a big piece. So we're going back into the plan, which can be a formatting nightmare, to be sure that all the links work and are functional. And then we have a rubric that we receive from the State Department. That's reviewed by a cross-section team at the state level. And we submit it February 1st, as well as post our newly revised plan. And then we will have feedback within the couple weeks after that on our plan.
Any additional questions?
Yeah, I just have something really quick. So now that we've kind of extended that mask mandate, will we have to like rewrite that in the reopening plan as like the new like executive order since it got changed and passed again?
That's a really good point, and I know that we will align what we have in terms of our expectations with the state expectations, so I would say yes, it should be reflected in our plan as well.
Yeah, anything that's been updated since when we originally put it out is very, very much worthy of putting into plan. So the new CDC guidelines, the new testing of our athletes for winter sports, even though we're not sure whether we're going to test in spring, we may as well put it in for winter because that's what we're doing now.
Dr. Couch, I just have a question for you. I know when some of the Western Shore counties had decided to close or go virtual, one in particular, I know MSDE was not pleased. Has there been any communication from MSDE back out to superintendents, school systems regarding, hey, listen, we need to keep kids in school, we need to keep things moving forward? That's been outside of what we see in the news or anything like that?
Well, the continued conversations that have been had with the state superintendent is, at all costs, try to keep students in school because we know that's the best instructional tool that we have with regard to relaying the curriculum. So unless there's some really adverse situation that would require us to consider virtual learning, I don't think that's in our toolbox at this point. So I don't have a firm answer. I do know that we have to get permission from MSDE to move to virtual learning. And there's a lot of hoops that we have to jump through in terms of getting MSDE's approval and MDH's approval. If we don't, then we risk having to make up those days at the end of the calendar.
Thank you.
Would it be possible to invite a representative from the Kent County Health Department to come and do a presentation on sort of the vaccination status in the county for us like they do at the county commissioners meeting?
We can do that. If that's your desire.
Yeah. No. Okay, any additional questions on the district reopening plan?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is procedure 638, early admission to pre-kindergarten.
Good evening again, President Getz, Dr. Couch, members of the board.
Good evening.
I am here to present tonight some updates to two procedures. Procedure 638, which is special early admission to pre-kindergarten, and updates to procedure 631, which is early childhood special education programs. Updates to procedure 638 outline inclusion of our 3-year-old program into our early childhood programs and pre-kindergarten, and to outline that pre-kindergarten is an early intervention program designed to help children become ready for kindergarten. So children who are admitted to pre-kindergarten early as a 3-year-old will be required to participate in the pre-kindergarten program for 2 years. So that kind of outlined the changes to that procedure to identify students who are also eligible for 3-year-old programs are students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged, and or could be homeless. This is for informational purposes only.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Would that, would each of our 3 elementary schools accommodate the 2-year pre-K program?
So as our policy is written and was written prior to starting the inclusive 3-year-old program, yes.
Okay.
Children with significant disabilities could be considered for our 3-year-old program or early entrance into their home school for pre-kindergarten, but it's based upon their disability, their needs, or why they're being referred to pre-kindergarten.
Yeah, I remember a year or so ago, we were talking about a 3-year-old program, and the catchment area was just like in Chestertown, it was Garnett, and we only have the Judy Center at Garnett, so I just wanted to make sure that it was not just Chestertown kids that could benefit from this.
Right, so that program was specifically under the Judy Center. The next procedure, 631, outlines more about the inclusive. I'm sure what happened. But the next procedure outlines more about the inclusive 3-year-old program.
Okay, thanks.
How many kids do you anticipate?
It's not many. Typically, many years, we do not get any requests besides students with significant disabilities.
But isn't the current 3-year-old program paid for by grant?
Yes. So, in the state of Maryland, children who are 3, who are considered students with disabilities, homeless, or economically disadvantaged, could qualify for early entrance into pre-K under 3-year-old programming, as outlined in COMAR. However, in Kent County, we also have the 3-year-old program that is the funded by the grant program that you are referring to, Dr. Costa. But we also have to consider those students who are not disabled as, are they eligible for early entrance into kindergarten?
Would this require more staffing?
No.
Okay.
Typically, we do not get children who are not asking for the 3-year-old program to enter pre-K early. It would mean that they would have to have a significant need, and that they would have to show that need through the screening process and through through the screening process that all.
Sorry, I think that mic's going bad. Not trying to kick that around.
So, I'm sorry, so let me go back. So,
Talk about screening and stuff like that.
So all children who come into pre-K have to have a screening, because pre-K is really designed as an early intervention program. So we want to make sure that we are addressing our students who need that extra early intervention support.
Is it likely that those students would be somebody that has been on your radar through infants and toddlers or something else like that? I mean, you probably won't be getting too many surprises.
Now, we don't typically get surprises, and then once parents do hear the procedure and what the procedures mean, they typically say, no, my child's not going to qualify, and do not pursue that. Because you do have to do 2 years in pre-kindergarten if you come in as a 3-year-old, where you can't come in and then the next year be considered behind, and then the next year skip to kindergarten because you were gifted or advanced.
Okay.
So, updates to procedure 631. The purpose of this procedure and update is to provide services to children from birth through the age of 4 to students with disabilities. So the infants and toddlers program does provide those services birth through 2, unless those children are found eligible for Part B services and receive services through that extended IFSP or through a preschool IEP. Preschool IEP services are for children ages 3 through the age of 5, not yet in kindergarten. Updates on this policy really outline the transition for children from an IFSP to an IEP through IDA.
Sorry, Dr. Kane. Don't take it personally.
And this is for informational purposes only, and I will stop talking.
Thank you.
What is the earliest grade that children are placed in non-public placements if needed.
We should be good now. Keep going.
That's an individualized decision, typically not pre-kindergarten. But, I mean, here in Kent County, the earliest that we have had that has been sixth grade.
I see.
Any additional questions, comments? Thank you, Dr. King, for the information.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The next portion of the meeting is the administrative services portion. Expenditures and revenue report is up first.
Good evening, Dr. Couch, President Getz, members of the board.
Good evening.
I'm going to start out with our monthly revenue and expenditure report that you, well, can't necessarily see it. I'm not at the podium, but I can definitely tell you what it is. We start with our cash receipts for the month, and this includes all of our Fund 1. That is about $16 million that we've received to date, and this is as of December 31st, 2021. Our capital projects, Fund 3, is about $469,000. Fund 5, which is our food service, $591,000, which gives us, and I'm sorry for that date not being changed, that is my fault. But it gives us a total for year to date from July to December 2021, $17,799,918.98. If you go to page 2, for our current expense fund, we have expended about 76% of that fund. I also have noted the budget amendment number 1 that was approved by the board and the commissioners. So that is just for you notate as well for any budget amendments that we have done for our Fund 1. Page 3, you will see school construction, what we have expended to date concerning our contractual agreements with Galena, Rock Hall, the central office parking lot, and as well as the Kent County High School track. Page 4 is going to show us our food service, and we've expended about 64% of those funds for food service. Page 5 shows our restricted funds, and we have expended with what we have for fiscal year 22, about 32% of our restricted funds. And the last page, page 6, just gives you a review of all of our receipts and expenditures to date as of December 31st, 2021. Any questions?
We, I think at the last meeting, approved the purchase of a bus, and then that ended up falling through. Are we looking for another bus to purchase, or is that going
No,
back?
we're not looking for another bus at this time.
Okay.
And I just have a question. It's probably not for you, Ms. Stewart, but from Dr. Couch. It's asking everybody, Galena, how is that completed, finished? Close?
Yeah, very close.
Okay, cool.
We're at this point where we're finalizing all of the change orders, and we will finalize the commissioning, which means the third party that comes in to make sure that all of the HVAC, the heating, everything is in place. Once that is done, they'll do their final numbers, and then they're done.
Okay, great. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
they did a lot of work during the winter break, and then also prior to winter break, so
Excellent.
we're in a good spot.
Thank you. Any additional questions regarding the expenditures revenue report for Ms. Stewart? That was for information only, so thank you for that, Ms. Stewart. We really appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is the unrestricted funds budget amendment number 2 for fiscal year 2022.
Okay, so this is to request board approval for the approval of budget amendment number 2 for this fiscal year 22 for our unrestricted funds. Each year with our budget, we allocate $100,000 for our non-public placements, special education, because we do not know the exact amount of what MSD is actually going to physically award us. I know for I believe it was for fiscal year 21, we received $140,000. For fiscal year 22, they're giving us $120,000. So we need to increase our revenue and our expense $20,000 for our non-public placements, and we're asking for board approval to do so.
This is an action item. Board approval is requested for the approval of unrestricted funds budget amendment number 2 for the fiscal year 2022. Do we have a motion to do so?
I move that we approve the unrestricted funds budget amendment number 2 for the fiscal year 2022.
Mr. Johnson has the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second was Dr. Costa. Any additional comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Stewart. The next item on the agenda is the single audit report for fiscal year 2021.
So for this fiscal year, we do the financial statement audit, but then there's an audit, a uniform guidance compliance report, which is pretty much if you may have heard it called an A133 report for all federal grant awards that we received. So this was for fiscal year 21. If you go into the report, you'll first notice that there's an independent auditors report, and that just basically gives an overview of the audit and how they conducted the independent auditors report. I do want to pull you to page 6 of the report, and page 6 of the report is pretty much what you want to notate, and what I want to notate to you all is that the auditors, which is TGM Group, they basically said that in our opinion, the Board of Education of Kent County, Maryland complied in all material respects with the types of compliance requirements referred to above that could have a direct and material effect on each of its major federal programs for the year ended June 30th, 2021. So we received also an unmodified opinion for our uniform guidance compliance awards. On page 8 and 9 of the audit, you will see the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. You will see the federal assistance listing number, which is in column 2 of the report. And that pretty much is the CFDA number, which is that unique identifier that they give the grants. So they looked and audited our child nutrition cluster, and that CFDA number was 10.555, 10.559, and 10.579. They did audit a couple of our coronavirus relief fund grants. This was CFDA 21.019, as well as one of our ARP grants that we received, which had a CFDA number of 21.027. As you will see in the schedule, they audit CFDA numbers 84.027 of our special education and 84.173. On page 9, go further, they audited our other federal awards such as Title I, Infants and Toddlers, Part C, our 21st Century Summer Learning Program, as well as some of our other COVID relief funding that we have received to date. So which gives the total of federal financial assistance of $3,788,256. As you go on page 10, it gives you and shows you the notes that the auditors have presented. I kind of want to point you to note 3, which is the reconciliation of federal awards. This is basically showing how they tie back to the $3.788 million. And that's because on our audited financial statements, page 22 of that, this $4,017,899 includes the addition of the federal sources, which is a retiree drug subsidy federal funds that we received, as well as our restricted federal awards that we received. So it totaled that amount. In the reconciliation, it does not include any medical assistance funding that we receive for infants and toddlers in school age on the federal side, nor does it include that federal source of retiree drug subsidy as well. So then that's how it brings you to the 3.788. And then lastly, on page 11, this is just the summary. So it's basically saying that we had the auditors given us a modified opinion on our financial statements, as well as on the uniform guidance compliance. There was no audit findings, and they basically let you know what major programs that they tested, which was the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, CFDA number 84.425C, and the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund CFDA number 84.425D, and the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which is CFDA number 21.019. And we are considered a low-risk auditee. So I just wanted to bring that to you all's attention. And we are requesting that the board has review and acceptance of our Uniform Guidance Compliance Report year ended June 30th, 2021.
Well,
Any
thank you
questions?
Yeah, so,
Good job.
any questions regarding the audit from here? Okay. Ms. Stewart, thank you very much for the presentation and walking us through that. This is an action item. The administration is recommending acceptance of the report presented. Do we have a motion to do so?
I move that we accept the report that was presented.
Mr. Johnson has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. McGee. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Ms. Stewart, again, thank you for the work that's being put in. Thank your team also for this. We really appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is the 8th grade academy study.
Yes, thank you, President Getz, members of the board. As I stated earlier in my report, we had a meeting at our educational specifications meeting, that committee meeting, that indicated that we needed to do a little more deeper dive into what the grade bands will be included in the new middle school, whether it's renovated or new space. And this is really coming from the public school construction division, which is the IAC, the Interagency Public Construction. And they are of the opinion that there is capacity at the high school, and I think we've heard this from several of our commissioners, that there's capacity at the high school, and with the state-rated capacity, I think there's on paper it shows that we have room for 1,500 students at the high school, which we only have less than 600 at the high school. So what they are of the opinion is, you know, the question that has to be answered is, why are we building a new school if in fact we have room at an existing facility that's underutilized? So one of the things that was brought up is, could the 8th graders be positioned at the high school in an 8th grade academy? And I know we looked at this during the strategic planning committee at one point in time. We looked at, you know, could the 8th graders go upstairs, and then could we displace the rest of the high school into other locations? Well, one of the things that we know to be true is, because currently, with the number of vacant classrooms that we have at the high school, there is not enough room to displace the total upstairs into existing and vacant classrooms. Now, given that, there have been programs, there have been personnel that have moved into classrooms and have taken over, you know, spaces that were designed to be classrooms, and so there's not perhaps an efficient use of the existing space. So for us to be able to answer that question, and for the IAC to be able to approve a new construction or new renovation, they are asking us to complete a study to determine whether the 8th grade could in fact go there to the high school and then fill up that facility. So that what you do is then you right size one building, and then perhaps you wouldn't have to build, if you were to build a new, let's just say that we were looking at grades 6, 7, and 8, and the 8th grade could go into the high school, then you would only conceivably need to build a new school that had 6th and 7th. So it would be a reduced size building that you would be having to construct, which would save money all the way around.
Or 5th, 6th, and 7th.
Or
to
5th, 6th.
alleviate some of the crowding in an elementary school.
Exactly, but what I'm saying is, when you just look at the fact that when you look at 6th, 7th, and 8th as the current existing configuration, they're looking at it just from an on-paper perspective. It could save some dollars from the public construction state match that they would have to put in. Now, we talked about, we would like to move the 5th grade, but in order to even make that decision, we have to make a determination on the 8th grade.
We've talked about this on more than one
Right.
occasion. So I can and I don't know what the answer is, but philosophically, we heard from a lot of parents who didn't want their 8th graders in a high school with 12th graders. We also heard how education in the year 2021 is not education in the year 1971 when that high school was built, which is why on paper it looks like, because we've got so many fewer, I mean, there's like a third of the students that were there when I was there 40-some years ago, but that doesn't mean the space isn't being used, like you said. So while it may be, I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I could definitely see where building a smaller middle school would be less expensive than building for like 5, 6, and 7, or just 6 and 7 as opposed to 6, 7, and 8. But I can't imagine there won't be some cost involved in renovations to the high school to make it,
Right.
be able to accommodate an 8th grade.
Right.
I'm not saying I don't agree
No,
with
no,
it.
no,
I'm just
I
saying
understand that.
we have been around Robin's barn with this.
Right, but I think we have to complete this study. That's why this
Okay.
study is really important, is for us to just finalize this study, look at, and it would be divided up into 3 conceivable phases. The first phase would be, what do we need in an 8th grade academy? How many classrooms are we talking about? What, if we need laboratories and we need spaces for them to complete labs? There are no spaces upstairs because they don't have running water upstairs. So that would require renovation. So, and then you'd have to displace some of the current, so all of these questions, they all interrelate.
I get
So,
that.
so what I would say is, by completing the study, we could answer the question. And of course, part of that question is, does it even make sense to do that? And so one of the things that we have to go back to is where, do we have existing facilities that we can look at? And so one of the things that was brought up by the state is Havre de Grace in Harford County is a 6 through 12 campus. Bow Manor is a 6 through 12 campus. St. Michael's, 6 through 12.
There's a
And
couple,
then-
I think Colonel
yeah.
Richardson is also.
Right, so there are a number of, and if you look at our unique challenges that we have, because we are a declining enrollment school system, one of the things that we have to think about is, does it make sense to initially have a middle school on the high school campus? Because as we start getting smaller, we may end up, in a decade from now, we may end up having a PK through 12 at the high school facility because we just won't have enough students. So, that kind of sets us up in a plan that would help us address sustainability in the next decade or so. So I
there-
think,
at first look, there are a lot of advantages. I mean, you've got the space to build.
right,
You've got facilities,
Right.
a gym, the community center, playing fields. Would part of the financial calculation include staffing? Because that was one of the drawbacks to moving the 8th grade out there at the high school at one point was, you'd have to move a whole crew of 8th grade teachers, I guess, out to the high school, because I think maybe an 8th grade teacher or a teacher in the middle school may teach more than one grade level of science.
can't. 8th grade can only teach 8th grade.
I know, but that's been,
Well, and that was
that's a whole,
part
yeah.
of the
Right,
benefit
eighth
of this
grade,
conversation.
yeah, well, one of the things that could fit into this, and just kind of thinking of it long-term, and this is something to be open-minded about, is that if in fact we were to look at an 8th grade academy, that would mean that the new middle school campus could potentially be connected to the high school, built going up, so if you did a 5, 6, 7, you might have 5th on the first floor, 6th on the second floor, 7th on the third floor, and then they would all be connected. They would have their own entrance, they would have their own administration. And then thinking about Kerwin, you've got to have students that reach CCR by 10th grade, which means they have to take more high school classes when they're in 8th grade. So are we forward thinking in terms of thinking ahead of the game by putting the 8th grade closer to the high school or in with the high school? You know, that could help us long-term in terms of meeting the requirements for CCR.
What's CCR?
College career readiness. And the last thing that I would say is when you look at doing a combined look at the high school and the middle school, we could get a little bit more bang for our buck. In other words, while we're doing renovations for the middle school, we could also do renovations for the high school. And so there could be an opportunity to do a fresh look. We could potentially look at the planetarium. You know, that could be part of the deal. We could look at making some improvements to the auditorium since it might be a shared facility. We could look at adding on a second gym, which would be good for them to, because if you look at the way the gym is situated now and the cafeteria is situated now, you could actually extend out because you've got the land to extend out, and you could add like a second gym, which would be useful for the high school if they ever had tournaments or that kind of thing, but it would still be a separate gym facility. So there's lots of things that we could think about that could be potentially beneficial to the high school students and to the middle school students. But we can't get there, and we can't even think about even if that's a possibility until we complete the study. So my recommendation is that we move forward and hire Educational Facilities Planning, LLC, as the sole source consultant to help us undertake this 8th grade academy study for a not to exceed $39,500. And I think that would allow us to timely address this question. The IAC is particularly interested in coming out and walking the buildings, walking the high school. They want to see how many vacant classrooms we have at the high school, how we're utilizing the facility, and do the same at the middle school, and help them get a better sense of what is happening in Kent County and what makes sense for us moving forward, and also, finally, what's going to help us sustain our enrollment problems or unique challenges in the years to come.
I got a couple questions just about the recommendation. Where would the money come from?
Well, we're not using as much in the substitute line item. I think we would have to wait till the end of the year to where we could look and see where we're going to move some of our existing funding. I do believe that we have enough money within our current, in talking with Ms. Stewart, we have enough money within our current allocations. We just may have to move something around and do a budget adjustment, but it would be with what we currently have in our budget.
So,
Can I add something real quick? Because I was part of the meeting, and I just wanted to reiterate a couple points that they're not making a recommendation that we do the 8th
oh, I
grade
get it.
academy.
No, I understood.
But they are requiring that we do the study in order for us to go forward with the continuation of the middle school ed spec. So it's
like
not
the
that we
chicken before the
necessarily-
egg.
Yeah, it's not that we necessarily have to have
Well,
an 8th
I
grade
understand all
academy,
that. I
it's
just
gonna
feel
be
like,
looking
good
at the
Lord,
states.
we've done this. Now, I'm doing a little Google search while we're sitting here, and I wondered where you came up with this idea of awarding this contract, and I see that it's David Levers. Okay.
Yes.
Is there any
Yeah.
sort of conflict with that? I mean, I feel like he's kind of been steering us a certain way. Did we have to put it out for bid? I mean,
Well, the thing is, we have to do this in a timely manner. He understands our district. We could put it out to an architectural firm, although it would be considerably higher, because they would have to do a full ed specs, which we're going to have to do at some point in time. This is just a small portion of the study of this current ed specs. And I think that he, you know, I don't think he's wed to one way or the other. It's the IAC that's telling us to complete this study. And
I know, I'm just being
I understand.
a little, I don't want to say skeptical, but I want it acknowledged that there is a connection between David Lever and this company, and that we have been,
In which company? Oh,
this educational facilities, whatever. I mean,
Right.
like I say, in the spirit of transparency, I'm acknowledging that, you know. It's not that I think there's anything nefarious going on, it's just, you know, David Lever's been a guy that has talked to us for year after year after year, and then all of a sudden, we're hiring his firm to do this study. So it just makes me a little, I don't know what. I want to have all four of my eyes open when I make a vote. Okay.
Right. I think the three basic questions that he's going to answer for us is, can the 8th grade go into the high school? What is the review of the existing spaces and determine how they're used, their sizes, and their schedule of use? So he wants to look at, you know, what currently, how's the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and data systems going to be used if we in fact move another set of students into the high school? And then finally, if we are going to move the 8th graders into the high school, then that spatial fit. What would we have to move from the high school in order to fit the 8th graders? In other words, would we have to renovate and add another additional space to house the rest of the high school students so that we could actually move the 8th graders? I mean, all of these three things have to be answered. And it's all based on the fact that on paper, there's space at the high school. And until we can answer that question, the state is not willing to give us any money to do renovation or new build until we determine whether we are using our space efficiently that we already have existing.
Yeah, and I think, in my opinion, I think having this consultant, or having a consultant to go through this process will officially give us an idea as to what it looks like. And Trish, to your point that we've been kind of pushing this idea around, you know, new middle school, not middle school, is there space at the high school, is there not, what does that look like? I think that this gets us to a place that, you know, we can finally answer some questions, you know, and decide from there what that looks like. I would ask from a timing perspective, you know, we certainly have a timeline, if you will. The committee, the EdSpec committee had a timeline, and I guess, you know, as any committee that is charged with a project, there's kind of a beginning, during, and end. How does this affect that beginning, during, and end?
This is one of those things that one of those studies that we're going to have to do in conjunction with
So it just layers on top?
It layers on
Okay.
top of it, so it'll be part of that final report. But to your end, I got an email from one of the members of the IAC after our last meeting. And initially, just to kind of put things in perspective, they were wanting us to look at whether we wanted to have a pre-K through 8 school in each of the communities, in each of our elementary schools. And I kind of chuckled about that because we've been there, done that. We had middle schools in each of the communities, and we went away from that and consolidated into one middle school. So they wanted us to say, well, can you do a PK through 8? And then that way, maybe you wouldn't even have to build a new middle school because you're just kind of dispersing. And after they listened to the conversation that we had at the last meeting, they changed their minds and said, you know, that's probably not where you want to go. You've already been there. And that in reality would have a staffing implication because you'd have to staff 3 8th grades versus 1 8th grade in 3 different communities. So I think this is all part of the process. In talking with other superintendents, this is not unusual that the IAC is asking.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I'm just looking back in an archive, it was in, was it 2017, Dr. Lever made a presentation to us with his 6-year master facilities thing, and his recommendation at the time was to put an entire middle school on like a new wing at the high school. So I guess a fresh look at it. I'm just being, I don't know what it is, maybe I'm being paranoid.
There were a couple recommendations. We didn't make a final recommendation.
We didn't, I don't even know if we even made a
Yeah, it
decision
was-
on any of that.
Going to be based on whatever this Ed Spec committee.
Yeah, and there were a lot of other priorities. It was the roof at Galena, it was the roof at Rock Hall Elementary School.
Right.
It was whether Garnett was going to get moved. I mean, I know there were a lot of things, and I guess it's reasonable to think that a lot has changed in 5 years with our enrollment, the status of our buildings, and maybe what 5 years ago seemed impossible is maybe a little more possible or a little more reasonable, given the life experiences we've all had over the last 5 years. I'm open to that. I'm just, again, I'm like, oh gosh, Dr. Lever,
From
he's
what I
like on our
recall, the
permanent
only
payroll here.
recommendation we made for the middle school during the 6-year strategic plan was that we would have this Ed Spec done. And there were multiple scenarios for what we could do with the middle school. But
Right.
it was just to give different ideas of what could be done. But I also want to point out that regardless of what the outcome is of the 8th grade academy, I don't think that it will become required if they say, okay, yes, you can fit an 8th grade academy in the high school, that we'll have to go.
No,
okay,
that's
now
not
we
a
have
done
to do
deal.
it.
Well, ultimately, the decision is ours, isn't it?
Well, yes, ultimately, the decision would be ours, but it may impact how much money we get from the state.
I get that, and it may impact what kind of support we get from 400 High Street.
That's right.
Yeah, the IAC, it seems like they're just closing the loop. They're clearly engaged.
Checking a box.
They're looking at what we have in front of them. They see that there's momentum, and I think there's open questions that we all were looking for answers to finally, I mean, Trish, to your point, 2017 is now, seems like forever ago.
Well, it was a generation ago of,
Yeah.
I mean, an entire graduation cycle of high school kids.
So it just seems like, just my opinion, it would be nice to kind of check the box, close the loop, whatever it looks like. We get to a place that allows the process to continue, and then we go from there.
Yeah, and it finally will help us close the argument about whether there is sufficient space at the high school. And that's not just coming from some of our county commissioners, it's coming from other people in the community. So I think it helps us to answer that question, whether there's room or not, and if there's not, then where do we go from here?
I think the Band-Aids that have helped us at the middle school are no longer sticking. So we have to kind of get to a place where it's like, we're here, we've used the Band-Aid box, and now we've got to go to a different spot. That's just my opinion.
We had really interesting discussion on pros and cons on different configurations, and Dr. Lever is going to put together a report
Well,
on
I
that.
remember a little bit of them, because I sat in on some of those meetings about the middle school, that it really, forget about the physical status of it, whether it's crumbling or not, or the number of students that happen to be in there. The configuration of it is not conducive to learning. There are interior rooms that have no light and those kinds of things. I totally, I was paying attention, so.
Well, no, even at this last meeting, we talked about whether or not you have secondary teachers and elementary teachers, and if we're able to share those resources now that they're in the same space, and you're not able to. I mean, things that only an administrator or a teacher would have been able to answer. I certainly wouldn't have even known to ask. But that was brought up because of the people on this new Ed Spec committee. So when I get that report, I'll send you a copy of it.
Okay.
Okay, this is an action item. The administration is recommending Educational Facilities Planning LLC as a sole source consultant to undertake the 8th grade academy study for a not-to-exceed cost of $39,500. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation?
I move that we approve the recommendation of the administration.
We have a motion by Dr. Costa. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Johnson. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is public participation. Ms. Manley, do we have anyone? We do not. Okay. The second to last item on the agenda is the notification of our next meeting. The next meeting of the Board of Education of Kent County will be held on February 14th, 2022, beginning at 5:30 PM with the open session. Open session will be immediately followed by the board members going into closed session. The open session will resume at 6:30 PM. The meeting will be located at the administrative building in the boardroom, this boardroom, at 5608 Boundary Avenue, Rock Hall, Maryland, 21661. The last item on the agenda is the administration is recommending the approval to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
Can we just do another reminder? The Citizens Advisory Committee is going to have its first meeting before the board meets in February.
Right.
Yes.
January the 24th at 5:30, the Citizens Advisory Committee will be meeting in this boardroom.
Right, thanks.
And I have I really want to get a board assembled for the foundation so that we can establish the foundation. So please email me your nominations.
And me too.
All of them, yeah.
Great. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to adjourn the meeting by Mr. Johnson. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Sullivan. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.